intricacy by looking beyond the cloak of conventionality. It means that if we want to research urban cultural landscape, we have to really take into consideration different approaches. And this topic is very, very new. I mean, like some books were published maybe only, I mean, like 5 years ago, first book appeared on the topic. Even the term begins to appear in cultural geography, and later in UNESCO conventions, several times it was mentioned, but really development of the research is just very current topic and it's still in process. I like the quotation by Sokupova, which is written also on the screen. The city is a complex of time and memory layers, a chain of generations of inhabitants, the memory embodied in architecture, sculpture, painting, landscaping. At the same time, it represents a complex of images that have existed and still exist in ethnic, generational, social, optional, local, and other modifications. So the research of city is really it's composed of different layers. And now we will just look deeply into what steps we have to follow when we want to research urban cultural landscape. First, very important is historic urban landscapes. I mean, like this is very often researched, and there are lots of now, not lots of, but many publications on historical urban landscapes. It's an identification of cultural resources, of a view of the iconic monuments and sites, recovery values, heritage, community sustainability. And the aim is to maintain the unique character of place and define possibilities for future development. And this is very important to look at the place as something what has or just brings a kind of value, because we know that now there are tendencies to destroy this kind of not very, let's say, useful places. And the cities are in the hands of residents, politicians, tourists, developers, employers, and population is constantly increasing in cities. So cities are expanding, and it leads to uncontrollable growth and changes in character or significance of place. I don't think it's the case of Nuraghi de Palmavera in Sardinia that's on the photo, but I just put it as a kind of historic urban landscape, very, very specific, and I think it can be interesting for you because some of you are maybe from Sardinia, so you know the place. It's not a city, but it's a historical urban landscape, and it's really well researched, and I think that it's a nice example. But if we talk about cities, this is really a big trouble to put together the historical part and the modern part and the new functions, because we are still looking or searching for new functions in cities. Then it's a kind of landscape rooted intangible heritage elements. This is very important because when we talk about the research in cultural landscape, we do not consider only the material production, the buildings and the constructions, but we also include memory of a city, language, characteristic events, preservation of tradition, traditional art, and also what art that is tied to the place as such, whether it's a literary work, painting, sculpture, and so on. So all this form a shared urban image. It means that all this creation of creatures are just connected together and make or help us to understand what's behind the shared urban image. Once again, on the photo, this is not it's a real photo. It's from Rennes in France, and on the photo you can see megaliths, a modern way how they decided to build new megaliths. And even they were built 1,000 years ago, and nobody knows who made them in this region of Brittany. They created a new one in modern form. So this was the way how they wanted to remember or just to give a new shapes to old, let's say, traditional forms that were in this region. So this is also very important to understand why people decided to build such kind of art, what's behind, and it can be included into cultural landscape research as intangible elements. Then we're going to this shared image of a city or urban shared image, because usually when we talk on cities or about cities, We look differently if we are tourists, if we are residents, if we are artists or writers. It means that our point of view and opinions about cities could be very different. Artists, poets, writers, however, often manage to capture it in the works, the main essence of the city. And their works formed the image of the city and literally pulled out what's characteristic of the city. So now we are mainly based on these characteristics, on this essence of the city that we share. Because sometimes it's kind of stereotypical point of view, or let's say cliche, because we have some assumptions. We just can be limited. We can be limited by the stereotypes about cities. But of course, we cannot say that the culture or urban cultural landscape of city is fixed. It has really, it has almost no borders because we can develop it differently from different perspectives, and especially culture and art is important, and they completely destroy or build a new point of view on the city image. So it can be only one book that is a bestseller all around the world, and it can change this shared image of a city. So this is also very important to take into consideration when we research urban cultural landscapes, because we are influenced. And also with my colleagues in a different project, we worked and we wanted to destroy a little bit these cliché and stereotypes in cities, because then it's a limit. We cannot go beyond this horizon. It means that we cannot discover more in a city if we stay only in borders of some stereotypes. Then very interesting is silent speaking city or territory. This is also a new, let's say, approach when we talk about diversity, otherness, confrontations, and that creates silent or speaking territories or cities. It means that sometimes silent territory, it's a place where we cannot no longer convey the content, what was and how it was and why it was built, and we cannot process it to the next or just current generation. And this is important to still follow the flow. If the place or the speaking territory is a place that we can understand. If a place speaks, it's maybe metaphorical way, but it gives us some contents. If there is a silent territory, there is no content, we do not understand what it is. And sometimes we talk about the loss of sense of the city or loss of values. When some transformations in cities now are not maybe very well done, it means that cities are losing their sense, their meaning, their values in, let's say, not controlled development, or just there are some not very well done, let's say, transformations inside. And it's connected with the cultural heritage, because cultural heritage is very important. On the photo, once again, there is a place from Šiauliai in Lithuania. It's a Hill of Crosses, very famous place. And this place I usually use as example of speaking territory. It's not a city, it's a territory, because it helps us to understand, even without words. If you know more about, I'm sorry, about if you know more, that means that we can understand better what's going on in the place. Okay, sorry, I was just interrupted by my phone. About multi-layered city. The concept of a multi-layered city is an urban transformation, which we must know from the point of view that there is a historical morphological identity of the place. And let's say that the city is literally composed of different layers. In the past, the country was transformed using materials that were available. Therefore, we can see the structure, buildings, architecture, method of processing, and so. But the most important substance is not the material and the constructions, but also the people who create it in given conditions. So therefore, one of the pillars is intangible practices, skills, experiences, but at the same time, culture, tradition, symbols, and materialization in space and time. So it was a natural way of building identity and continuity combined with the development of human creativity. It means that it was always man, the one who transformed the landscape. And in the research, we have to focus also on not only what material was used and in what time, but also why and how it looks and how the people decided to build it this way, how they preferred a kind of style, how they preferred a way of living. That's very important and interesting to see. Example on the photo, it's a Warsaw, and I decided to put it as example because it's, you know, it was completely destroyed during the Second World War, and it was rebuilt in the same form after the war. So it's interesting to see the buildings who remain the past, but they are, let's say, contemporary and kind of modern, but they just should looks like many or before the Second World War. And now I'm going to the next part of my presentation, and it's about challenges of urban cultural landscape development, what city we want, how we want our city to look, and what a city we really await or just would like to see. There are two possibilities, and let's say they are connected also nowadays in our world. City as the center of trade, entrepreneurship, research, innovation, education, training, social inclusion, and cultural cooperation. Let's say this is a positive attribute, but also center of poverty, unemployment, crime, low quality, energy intensive housing, deteriorating environment, and so on. Even there are two photos. It's not, I don't want to say that these cities are example of one or the other, but it's just example of how it can look and what we can see in our cities and how we deal with these new challenges that are coming. It's not just nowadays, but now I think it's more urgent because of climate changes and so on. A city we want, I decided to follow the Gal the definitions because he was working on this topic, and there are like 4 categories. So we will go one by one to see. So it's a kind of living city. We want a city that is a living organism that increases as more people to be motivated to walk, ride a bike, or stay in public places. It means that a city without people is just a kind of, let's say, silent territory, and also it's not. It's just something we cannot maybe see very positively. Even it happened during the pandemics, but we will talk after. And there are also social and cultural events in public spaces that create and makes places still be alive. It means that this is the life in a city. So the city should be generator of life and of social life. This is very important to take into consideration. If we do not attract people to come to the city, even the residents, and there are also, this can go into different directions. I mean, like if the city is only for tourists and not for habitants or residents. But this will be the question for maybe for tomorrow when we will talk about tourism and so on. So I will just let this topic on side. Then it's safety and safe city. So there should be a guarantee of safety and sense of security in a city. It means there should be adequate structures, short walking distances, attractive public spaces that allow us or you to monitor what's happening. So we need to feel safety in a city, and it should be guaranteed to us. So safety is very important. Then it's a question of sustainable city. It means that now it's a very current topic, and almost in every city all around the world, maybe in Europe, let's say, and also in some western parts. The question of sustainability and green mobility and emissions, or just limiting emissions or noise levels, is very, very urgent topic, because we say that the quality of life depends on the quality of public spaces. And very important is also greenery in public spaces, and also the use of new technologies and saving energy in public spaces. An example is Lahti in Finland, that is European Green Capital for this year, and they showed and they proved that they are doing a lot to make and to create a sustainable city that is not damaging the nature, and they just do the opposite. They want to be very less consumptive, or consumption is at a very low level. So let's hope that one day we will be just one of these European green capitals, and it's very nice that this kind of effort exists in Europe. And it's healthy city. It's connected with sustainability, but in a different way. Rapid growth of health problems in the city. I just mentioned one sentence that the aim of the city should not be inhabited by sick inhabitants. It means that people who are living in the cities should not be sick because they are living in the city. And the question is pollution in every sense. It's smoke pollution, it means air pollution. Also, sometimes we talk about light pollution and so on. So the quality of life and the limits and the controls to provide a good, healthy city and to keep the levels of the pollution at the normal level, it's a big challenge for almost all the cities around us. So cities now are really in a big challenge. It's not only this what I mentioned. I think you can find more examples and more approaches, but this was one of the most important. A very interesting approach how to help cities is to build and to create cities without cars. It's a mobility, I mean, like a bike mobility, or people should use different transport tools. I don't know how to explain it better, but maybe you are just walking in your city, or just not using cars so much. But the cars are very, very big problem for cities nowadays. And this is an example about a place or a city without car. Even I'm talking only about all city. And it's because of the location, and about that it's almost impossible to drive a car, I think, in Venice. So it's one of the few places in the world where people do not travel by car. And of course, the landscape and the urban landscape of Venice motivates you to walk. So there are two, it combines two. It's the historical structure that provides you this way of really enjoying the landscape, and how it was constructed. It just doesn't allow cars to be in this old city. So that's a kind of very interesting example, but it's just very unique. So I just wanted to mention. How to be interested in the city. Now we see that people, even they live in the city, they just do not care about the cities. And it's a trend that studies from around the world show that if we want to be people engaged in what's happening around them and in cities, they should be really using the public urban spaces. If they do not use the public spaces, they are not interested in the city as such. So that's why now we see, and it's connected with the civic engagement, and we can see that people are just becoming more and more interested about what's going to happen, how it's going to look around them, and they want to be the creators of urban cultural landscape of modern ways. So they are really interested in plans and into what's going to happen, and they want to be actors, not only a passive let's say spectators of what's going on. There is a kind of plan of city development in Paris that has not been realized yet, but it was the plan then when inhabitants of Paris near the airport Charles de Gaulle, they were just asking and talking about how they want to change this very gray and not very attractive area and I wanted to build this new green housing estate, because there are flats and there is, let's say, a big green area as I don't know what, as a roof. So they would like be involved in the process of decision making, and also they would like to see how just to decide how it will be, and to make, let's say, artificial natural areas, even it was just completely destroyed before, because now it's really a gray area. So we will go to one of the very interesting topics, and it's diverse city life, old tradition and new city policy. This is a question when we talk about the urban cultural landscape, about how we want to put together the old tradition and new city policy. So it means how to provide people the content and how to not miss the structure, but also how to get new functions to old buildings. I cannot tell you how it will be, because it's in every city, it's unique, and also the public policy or the city policy is different. But what we usually observe and what we follow, we usually see a city as a meeting place. Even now it was almost impossible to meet in a city, but it's place of social activities. So it should provide places for crowds, for discussions, for meeting people. Also have something to see and get important information. So that should be and follow these functions. And of course, we still follow the tradition that a city was a meeting place in ancient times, and it's still a place where we want to meet. So what's the function of city in general? So that's the question that we are asking now, especially when we see empty cities around us. So that's very urgent question. And also very important in urban landscape is the question, what is a beautiful city? What is a beautiful urban landscape? This is this last part of my presentation, when I would like to know, and maybe after I've closed the screen and presentation, I will ask you how you see beautiful city and what's beautiful landscape for you. Because when we talk about the stereotypes, and as I mentioned at the beginning, we usually look at some places that we know all around the world, some metropoles that are very well known. But if we talk about the beautiful landscape, we take into consideration if there are short, logical roads, small spaces, hierarchy of urban space, tradition, and protection of historically valuable space. It means this historical value should be protected somehow. Of course, I gave you, there is an example of Rome that it's very well known, and maybe you from Aquila can feel not very comfortable to see always Rome as an example of Italian city. But this is the stereotype, and if we want to break down the stereotypes, we have to look also at different urban landscapes and different cities. And then it's in this research of urban landscape, we have to focus also that people usually look at the A level. I mean, like a pleasant city is built at A level. Because if we walk in the cities, we just do not look very high. We just look at A level, and what we see, we consider and we take into consideration. And this should be also a place that can provide us an opportunity to walk in day and night and to meet people, as I mentioned before. So our criteria about beautiful, it's not based on a style, on urban shape. Sometimes it's really on, we should feel comfortable in this place, because cities could be really, really very different. But when we talk about design, the high quality city takes care of design and design of individual elements. So this is very important. And especially I would say that in my region, we do not care a lot about aesthetics and architecture. So then it's a mixture of different styles, and it provides you a kind of chaos. So it should create a visual harmony. Now it's called also colorscaping. As a research of urban landscape, when we take into consideration colors. in what colors and what shapes and designs form is built are buildings I mean like made. So it's not only beautiful but also functional. As example is the Strasbourg that was built not because they wanted to build a beautiful city, but they just build it in one style and still follow this line so that you feel really authentic ambience in this place. And city is sometimes considered, or urban landscape is considered to be a gallery, because this is connected with culture and city culture. So city as a gallery, installation and temporary exhibited pieces of art that complement the public spaces. Art is very important in creating the city image and how we see, because if there is a statue, we want to make photos around. So these places where the pieces of art are just exhibited are very often visited not only by tourists but also by residents. Very special question is artistic lighting, because this can show and this can give a new perspective to urban landscape, and of course culture as a part of public space. We see that cities, and if I talk about speaking territories and about culture and engagement of people, the culture is what brings people to city, and that's why they go to the city. To finish a little bit, this session is about greenery, trees, parks, flowers, green elements, take care of greenery, and visual pollution. This is very urgent topic in many places, especially once again here in Slovakia. The problem of different billboards and advertisements all around, that you cannot see the buildings, but you see the advertisement. Now we started some regulations, but we cannot talk about urban landscape when our landscape is just fulfilled by billboards and advertisements. So that's kind of way how we take and how we deal with the landscape and so. And the landscape should be interesting and beautiful also in night. It means that lighting has a great influence on orientation, safety, and visual quality. And the light can also have an artistic character. But we talk about the importance of light in cities to see the landscape, but also on the opposite side is the light smoke or light pollution, because now it's too much light in cities, and we means that we have some health troubles because everything is light and all the time, and also some birds or animals who lives in the cities are just they just don't know where is the day and when is the night. So this should be really regulated and taken into consideration if we can do something about. The identity of a place, it may be the last topic I want to talk about in this introduction. As I mentioned before, there is so many different approaches. This was just, I wanted to show you what is included into the research and what can be observed and how different perspectives we can see. And all is connected with the identity of the city. I started my presentation with with a sentence that the identity was the first, the landscape is the second, and identity and landscape are completely connected, because identity of a place is very important to understand culture or urban cultural landscape. We can identify part of the city with some themes. We are searching for symbols. We want to understand how it was built, when and why people, this intangible heritage is very important, this knowledge. And of course, we want to understand what public really wants and not just what we plan in public spaces. So there is kind of identification, consideration, evaluation, and then making a decision about public spaces. And increased cooperation of citizens, especially youngest. It's very nice that it now happens and it appears in cities that young generation is very involved in changes, and the people are really interested in making changes. And this is the way, and it's connected with the second topic, transformation and conservation of cultural heritage, that was developed by my colleague Vera Kreshakova in this project. especially in the case of industrial heritage. I'm not going to talk about today because my time is going to be over, but you will read it, I hope, in the book that will be published in the project. And this is interesting to see that if the people and the young generation is interested in what spaces and why, and of course it's connected with tourism. So the identity of the city is sometimes discovered more by tourists, by the resident than by the residents, and it's another topic. So I will just close it here, and if you have some questions, we can maybe discuss later. And now the question, because this summer school is about the post-pandemic world, and the question is when the city is locked down. The question that appeared in this pandemic years, that was the question where we can be locked down in a city. The question of places, spaces, and so how to keep a social distance, another big question, and what to do with empty urban places. That I will not answer you. That's the question for all of you to maybe talk together. So I will just finish my presentation and we can have just a small discussion about what's happened when the city is locked down and how is your impression about how the urban landscape of a city changed under the influence. But before I finish, sorry, I will just tell you that I have a colleague from the Oxford University, Dr. Laia Anwix, and she worked on the topic of the visual transformation of city, of this different graffiti or the visual forms that appeared in cities in Europe during pandemics. So on the photo there, you can see only one example, but she really made a good research, and she researched how we reacted to pandemic world and what we put into the public space. So how we reconstructed the public places, the visuality of public spaces under the pandemic situation. And so that may be all for today and from my side. To close it, just the concept of cultural landscape is not something external, but part of us. We are part of cultural landscape and we are landscape, and philosophically speaking, landscape would not be cultural landscape without people. So that's just what we can research and study in urban cultural landscape. And I like the last quotation from Gail, life, space, building in this order. That means that life and our life is more important than just buildings, and not just buildings, but we should really modify the environment, but carefully and with respect to everything. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have some questions, you can send me an email or we can discuss now. There are some books I used to prepare the presentation, and that's all. Okay. Thank you very much. That's nice to see you, because I started with about 10 participants and now I see 25. So thank you for being here. So I would maybe continue with the question I asked you. Maybe you can write me to the chat about or on how you think that the cities changed under pandemics and what you see as the biggest changes in the cities. Please do not hesitate. You can write almost anything you want, okay? Okay, thank you very much for not writing anything. So that's very nice. Okay, Paola. Thank you.
I'm so sorry that our students are not going to react to this wonderful lecture. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, because I think that we were wise in putting, there is something.
Yeah,
there is something.
Okay, thank you.
Ah, thank you for the night. So it's I think that my lecture somehow would be enriched by contribution from yesterday and also from today. Meanwhile, you were talking, you know, and talking about these things. Probably you see, I just grabbed a book on my back, and I was looking to a sentence that Lorenzo Cotti and I, we wrote many years ago, exactly 15 years ago, that it was about contemporary beauty in architecture. And that it was, you know, we were one Italian, one Swiss Italian. So we say that we wrote that contemporary beauty means that is of the present day. Contemporary beauty means that it belongs to us in an intimate manner, and that's international value. That is what you show us and you see, you know. So thus, in the present day, beauty would be an inner characteristics, which crosses various differences, ethnical, cultural, social, temperamental. But nowadays, it seems that this is a bit confusing. So we continue after something saying that, you know, in the past, there was a French beauty, Italian beauty, Polish beauty, Slovakian beauty, Spanish beauty, and so on. These kinds of beauty corresponded to, or rather were a product of certain taste. So in some culture, like Swiss culture, for instance, where we have four ethnic groups, four cultures, what is beauty? We ask to ourselves. So we went to some sort of standardization that is just mixing all together and is giving, you know, it makes our style what is called international, but you can have everywhere. You know, you can, is exactly what you show at the end. So this is a big question mark for us, not as only as, I mean, architects or anthropologists, but as urban planners. This is one of the main problems. You don't recognize yourself in a specific city. You were talking about Palmavera, citing your example, Palmavera or, you know, Venice. But they were, let me say, frozen in the time. I mean, they passed some multi-layered, but they were frozen. You know? So this is this transition between, let's say, the frozen landscape that became stereotypes, and the landscape that are in continuous transformation dynamic. This is the conflict that, in my opinion, we cannot solve properly. And pandemic is showing us a lot of this. What I'm saying is that, you know, it has to do also with our culture. In one word, with our tastes.
Yes. Yeah.
You know. So it's. What do you think about it? What is your opinion about that? Because you gave us a lot of food.
Yeah, I'm just
a lot of food to think about.
Yeah, I think that you are right. Of course, not of course, but you are right that, you know, when I was just talking about this, there's too many different. Okay, too many different landscapes, and that's very important. As I mentioned, Venice and also Palmavera. It's a very specific examples. They are just, as you said, just frozen in times. But then there are places that are until never-ending development, and unfortunately, what we see now, and what you mentioned when you were in Slovakia, there is so many developers that want to destroy the soul of the cities. And not only cities, but we talk about heritage. It's also of a natural heritage that is going to be, it's called a kind of Disneyland days, like Disneyland parks. I mean, like, there are so many things that should never appear in the natural environment. So we should, I think, every case take properly and deeply, and maybe this respect and understanding of cultural values and I mean, like this culture should be still in our minds when we suggest something in public spaces. So that's my opinion. I don't know what the others think, and there is written. Then I agree with your conclusion. In our city, we have a long time problem with traffic parking, but during pandemic situation, the traffic solved itself. It had a positive effect. So yes, you see that it can be solved in a minute, but this pandemic show us that what we want in our cities, how we want to deal with them when they are empty. It means, as I mentioned, cities should be living, not empty. And we should keep distances. Now the hygiene is very important in public spaces. If you enter a shop, you have to pass almost, I don't know, some procedures. So people are just keep in 2 meters distance. It's changed. What do you think? Also, others, it's changed the city, the lifestyle, or it's still the same? What about Italy? Because you are people who are used to be out in restaurants, and now you have to keep social distance. I don't know.
I lived pandemic in 3 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
In Italy, in Switzerland, in Thailand.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some degrees of freedom, different degrees of freedom in movement. Meanwhile, in Italy, it was complete lockdown. So even to get out from your home, you need, a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a feeling of, let's say, claustrophobia. And also it makes people, luckily architects, finally, they think that the existence minimum in a home is not what is needed. Maybe there are some other needs that have to be looked at. And also there must be a connection between what is inside with what is outside. All the talking about balcony and the stuff of green roof, please don't ask me to talk about it, because there are some examples of what the Italian architect called post-pandemic city that make me just a bit nervous on their banality and triviality, because it's something that is, Garden City solved it or other things many years ago. The other was, in Switzerland. In Switzerland, here we have some different approach. You can move. You don't need permission because it's not allowed. It's just suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
But people stay in lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
This is the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different degrees of freedom, as I told you. Then it was in Thailand. In Thailand, it was complete lockdown, but it was never a really complete lockdown, because you can go and you can have some freedom. It was just, after Songkran in March and then in April. But again, what is the meaning of public space? The meaning is when you can use that space safely, and this space must be as much as possible adaptable.
Yes.
I'm working in this concept since many years because I'm working in risk. So I'm talking about dual space that can be used in, and I will talk later with the students. But this is what I mean. We do not need new shapes. We need to understand and to design new way how to use, in my opinion, the city, to think how we can transform. Venice was empty, but the citizens were so happy that no tourists were there. But the economic sector was desperate for that, So
yes,
we have to still to think in a not stereotype way, and I think that we have to search a lot about it. But it makes us think. Sorry, I don't know if I.
I agree with you, Paola, and I think that tomorrow when I don't know who, but somebody from Bilbao will talk about tourism, because tourism was completely affected by the situation, and this post-pandemic, it's kind of risk. Of course, it's a kind of let's say disaster that happened to cities, And it's a new question for you as urban planners to answer, and also to ask what we want to do and deal with our, let's say, urban landscape around us. I would say that now it's 10 minutes to 5, so I will maybe give you some short break before Paula starts at 10, if you agree. So you have like 5 minutes for just tea or coffee, and we look again at 10. Paula, we cannot hear you.
Can we have 10 minutes?
Okay.
And 10 minutes, and we can start at 10:05.